My name is Casey, and I'm 31 years old. I live in a charming duplex in the vibrant city of Portland, Oregon, where the morning mist weaves between towering evergreens and the sound of distant train whistles drifts through my window. My mornings start with a steaming mug of oat milk latte, a few quiet moments tending to my indoor plants, and an energizing jog along the Willamette River. I work as a bicycle infrastructure planner for the city's Department of Transportation, a job some assume is just about building bike lanes, but in reality, it means designing safer urban routes, analyzing commuter data, hosting community feedback sessions, and working closely with engineers to make cycling accessible and enjoyable for everyone. As Portland slowly stretches awake each morning, I find myself doing the same, blinking into the light and wondering what the day will bring. Maybe it's the endless rain, or maybe it's the city's mix of new energy and old eccentricity, but something about this place always makes me feel like stories are brewing just beneath the surface, ready to surprise you when you least expect it. If you think working with city officials and commuters gives you a thick skin, try navigating the unpredictable weather of family relationships. I used to think I knew all the twists in my own family's plot until one designer bag changed everything. Nicole is my little sister, though the word little doesn't quite fit anymore. She's 29, sharp as a tack, and for most of our lives we were two branches growing side by side on the same sturdy oak. We shared a bunk bed, old bike rides, and whispered secrets in the dark. But adulthood has a way of blowing those branches in different directions. She's a nurse now, intense and driven, the kind of person who'll argue with insurance companies for hours if it means her patients get the treatment they deserve. I've always admired her fire, even when it singed me a little. This story really begins on a Sunday, so typically Portland that it could have been painted in watercolors, gray skies, the promise of rain, and the aroma of fresh bread from the bakery down the block. Nicole showed up at my place that afternoon with a look I couldn't quite read. In her hands was a Louis Vuitton bag, the kind of luxury accessory you'd expect to see on Fifth Avenue, not in my tiny plant-filled kitchen. It gleamed on the counter, absurdly glamorous, next to my chipped mug and bowl of mandarins. The number $340,000 floated in the air between us like some impossible statistic. Was this a prank? Was I on a hidden camera show? I stared at Nicole, waiting for her to break into laughter, but she didn't. Instead, she smiled tightly and said, "I wanted you to have something special. You deserve it." I laughed, not sure what else to do. "Did you rob a bank or win the lottery and forget to tell me?" I joked, hoping to break the tension, but she just shook her head. There was something guarded in her eyes, like she was bracing for impact. I'll confess, my first thought wasn't about fashion or envy, but pure logistics. Where would I ever carry something like this? I imagined riding my battered commuter bike to City Hall, with a Louis Vuitton swinging from the handlebars, and almost snorted my coffee. The bag belonged in a glass case not slung over my shoulder at the grocery store. Nicole seemed to sense my awkwardness, but she insisted. "It's yours. Really, you deserve something beautiful." I wondered if she was talking about the bag or something else entirely. Our family has never been flashy. We grew up in a house where birthdays meant homemade cakes and hand-me-downs, not designer labels or six-figure handbags. Mom and Dad taught us that value wasn't written on a price tag. Nicole's gesture was so out of character that for a second I suspected there was a catch, a string attached I couldn't see. I remember thinking families are like old houses. They look solid, but sometimes a single unexpected storm exposes every hidden crack. The bag sat in my dining room for days, untouched, almost glowing in the late afternoon light. Every time I passed it, I felt a prickly mix of gratitude and unease. It's strange how one gift, no matter how expensive, can feel heavier than a box of rocks. Nicole called to check if I'd used it, and each time I hedged, making up silly excuses. "It's too rainy for leather, or I don't want to outshine my boss at work." We laughed, but underneath I could tell we were both dancing around something unspoken. Families always do this, don't they? Avoid the real talk until it erupts in ways no one expects. Here's the reality check. In family life, the line between gift and burden is thinner than you think. We talk about unconditional love, But sometimes the conditions are just hidden under layers of old wrapping paper and half-forgotten birthday cards. Sometimes the prettiest boxes hold the thorniest surprises. Share your thoughts about Nicole's choice. Was she being too harsh, or just protecting herself after years of feeling hurt? This prompt encourages you to reflect and share your perspective about setting boundaries in family relationships and the importance of loving and respecting yourself. Let me know where you're reading from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I'm genuinely curious. Thank you for listening to Nicole's story. Don't forget to share your thoughts and follow for more deep, meaningful stories like this one. I wish I could tell you that after that extravagant Sunday everything settled and the bag simply became a quirky conversation piece, just another weird Portland anecdote to share over happy hour. But instead it turned into something that hovered over my relationship with Nicole, like the city's ever-present clouds. I started noticing how every text or call from her felt a little different, as if we were tiptoeing around a minefield neither of us had mapped out. When we were kids, Nicole and I had been inseparable. Our childhood memories are sticky with maple syrup pancakes, after-school cartoons, and whispered plans for running away together to become famous musicians or explorers, or at one point, professional Lego architects. There was always laughter, always something shared, even if it was just a broken cookie or a scraped knee. But adulthood, with its bills, deadlines, and relationships that never quite make sense, stretched us apart in ways I'd never anticipated. Our phone calls became shorter, more practical. Holidays felt forced, like everyone was trying to perform the part of happy family for an invisible audience. The real split didn't come all at once. It snuck in like Oregon fog. One morning you see it swirling at your feet, and by lunchtime you can't see your own hand in front of your face. For us, the first real crack appeared the evening Nicole invited me for dinner at our parents' house. She texted Mom's making her famous roast you in. I said yes, not knowing that this ordinary invitation would lead to one of the most uncomfortable nights of my adult life. Our parents' place is a little craftsman home with creaky floors, mismatched chairs, and a kitchen that always smells faintly of garlic and old books. It's the kind of house where time feels suspended, where you could almost believe nothing bad has ever happened. But that night, the energy was off. Nicole showed up dressed to impress, her hair sleek and her makeup perfect. She set the Louis Vuitton bag down on the counter front and center so everyone could see it. My mom's eyebrows arched. She always notices details, but she said nothing, just offered Nicole a glass of Pinot and asked how work was going. I watched as my parents exchanged glances, and for a moment, I felt like an outsider in my own family, as if I were watching a performance from backstage. Dad cleared his throat and asked about the bag. Nicole smiled and told a story about a new side gig, some investment that had paid off. She made it sound light, effortless. I tried to match her energy, but my voice kept catching like I'd swallowed a pebble. Dinner passed in a blur of small talk and awkward pauses. Nobody mentioned the price, but you could feel it, a silent guest at the table. After dessert, as we all lounged in the living room, Nicole handed the bag to me again in front of everyone this time. "Casey, really, you have to take it," she insisted. "It'll look good on you." My mom smiled politely, but her eyes were questioning. Dad asked, "Is it practical?" which is classic Dad. "Speak for, what were you thinking?" I shrugged and said something about wanting to keep it safe for special occasions. The whole exchange felt like an audition I hadn't prepared for. On the drive home, I replayed the evening over and over like a scratched record. Was I being ungrateful? Was Nicole trying to prove something? Why did it all feel so loaded? I found myself wishing for the days when our biggest fight was over. Who got the last piece of pie? The bag, once a symbol of luxury, now felt like a wedge, one that neither of us wanted to acknowledge, let alone remove. Here's the punchline. If you ever want to see a family unravel, just add money, pride, and a dash of unspoken history. It's like a recipe for emotional soufflé, one wrong move and it all collapses. I tried to joke about it with a friend at work the next day, but my sister gave me a bag worth more than my car story landed with an awkward thud. They laughed, but I could tell no one quite knew whether to congratulate me or send a therapist. Nicole and I stopped texting as much after that dinner. Weeks passed. My birthday came and went with a half-hearted emoji from her. It was as if the bag had soaked up whatever easy affection we'd once had, leaving only awkward silences in its place. I wondered if I should just sell it, donate the money, or leave it in the back of my closet as a relic of our failed connection. But mostly, I just missed my sister, the version of her who laughed at my bad puns and built blanket forts with me on rainy afternoons. Looking back, I realize every family has that one thing, the unspoken, unsolvable riddle everyone pretends not to see. For us, it came in the shape of a brown and gold designer handbag. Some people inherit silverware or secret recipes. We got baggage, literally. And if you think that's funny, you should hear what happened next. If you've ever seen a rumor spread at a family gathering, you know it's faster than a Portland cyclist on a hill. After that, dinner news of the Louis Vuitton bag somehow took on a life of its own. At first, it was just whispered curiosity, our aunt messaging me a series of question marks. My cousin sliding into my DMs with a heard about the bag spill. Even my brother, who lives 3 states away and once mistook a designer logo for a band name, texted to ask if I was moonlighting as a celebrity. It didn't take long before the gossip mutated into something sharper. Suddenly, people were weighing in on everything from my career choices to Nicole's financial habits. At a family birthday party the next weekend, the bag was all anyone wanted to talk about. My grandma, who had survived the Great Depression and believes luxury is a warm loaf of bread, pressed my hand and asked in a whisper if Nicole had fallen in with bad influences. I nearly choked on my lemonade. Nicole, for her part, acted like the bag was invisible. She floated through the room, cool and poised, making conversation about her work or the latest health trends. But I saw how she tensed when someone's gaze lingered too long, or when Mom's friends shot me sympathetic looks across the potato salad. I tried to keep things light, made a joke about starting a designer satchel support group, but the laughter died quickly. You'd be surprised how threatening a piece of leather and hardware can be when layered on top of years of family competition, old wounds, and hidden resentments. Somehow, I became the accidental villain in my own story. Relatives started asking how I could accept such an expensive gift. Was I flaunting my good fortune? Did I know what Nicole had sacrificed? One uncle quipped. Must be nice to have a sister who treats you like royalty. That stung, especially since for most of our lives, I was the one bailing Nicole out of scraped knees, bad decisions, and the occasional emotional spiral. It's almost funny in a tragic way. Our family has always loved a good drama, but this was less a soap opera and more like an experimental improv show, one where nobody knew their lines and everyone kept dropping props. Nicole stopped coming to gatherings as much. I found myself fielding questions about her in absentia, as if I was the PR manager for House Vuitton. Is she okay? Is she making smart choices? Does she want to talk, as if Nicole was suddenly a fragile artifact, too delicate for direct contact? At work, my coworkers teased me, but even that was tinged with something new. One afternoon, as I was sketching out a new bike path plan, a colleague wandered over and said, "So what's it like to have a 340K albatross around your neck?" I tried to laugh, but the truth was, I felt like I was wearing it everywhere I went, even when it stayed locked in my closet at home. The bag became a metaphor for everything unresolved between Nicole and me. Every time I looked at it, I thought of the conversations we weren't having, the ones about trust, jealousy, and the different ways we'd learned to survive in our family. It's amazing how a single object can accumulate so much emotional residue. One night, I dreamed I was carrying the bag through a flooded city, struggling to keep it above the water, while Nicole called for help from the other shore. I woke up sweating and couldn't help but laugh at how my subconscious had turned our baggage into literal baggage. Freud would have a field day. The summer rolled on sticky and tense. I started to dread family events, worried that every conversation would circle back to the bag, or worse, to whatever secret Nicole was keeping. My parents, usually oblivious to subtle drama, began dropping hints. Mom would say, "It's just a bag, Casey. Don't let it get between you two." Dad grumbled about people forgetting what's important, but neither of them asked the question, burning a hole in my heart. Why had Nicole really given it to me? If you think families outgrow sibling rivalry, let me assure you all it takes is one unexpected gift to throw you right back into childhood patterns. The bag was never just a bag, it was an x-ray of our relationship, exposing every old bruise and tiny fracture. And as much as I wanted to believe I was above it all, I was as tangled up in the drama as anyone. Still, in the rare, quiet moments, I'd remember the way Nicole used to slip into my room after a nightmare, or how we'd team up against the world when things felt scary. I missed her laugh, her snarky texts, the shared shorthand that only sisters have. I kept hoping we'd find a way through the weirdness that this season of whispered rumors and silent dinners would pass. But deep down, I knew nothing would change until we finally faced the truth about what the bag really meant for both of us. The Louis Vuitton bag may have looked glamorous, but it was like a silent argument sitting on my kitchen counter, always there, impossible to ignore. I started to notice how even everyday conversations with my parents or coworkers circled back to Nicole's generosity, as if everyone wanted to pick apart the story behind the gift. At the office, a coworker made a joke about asking for my fashion advice, then nudged, or should I ask Nicole's investment manager? People think these remarks are harmless, but they're like little paper cuts. One by one, they start to sting. In my own family, these little jabs turned into something more. Every time my mom called, she'd ask, "Have you used the bag yet?" As if its presence was a test of my gratitude. Dad tried to act indifferent, but always found a way to steer conversations toward work ethic and being practical. The message was never direct, but always clear enough. Expensive gifts mean you owe someone something, even if nobody will say what. If you've ever played board games with your family, you know that rules aren't nearly as important as the unspoken alliances and grudges that carry over from game to game. This was no different. Rumors were still swirling among extended family and even Nicole's circle of friends. A cousin asked if I'd started living the influencer lifestyle. My aunt called to say I should watch my taxes this year. Nicole, meanwhile, seemed to retreat further into her own world. Our texts got shorter, more clipped. If I sent a meme or tried to make her laugh, she'd respond with a thumbs up, maybe a heart, but nothing more. It was as if the bag had taken all the air out of the room. Every joke fell flat. It got so bad that I started having dreams about being chased through downtown Portland by a mob of fashionistas wielding credit cards and calculators. In one especially vivid nightmare, the bag grew bigger and bigger until it was the size of a car, and I had to lug it up the steps of City Hall, everyone watching as I struggled, pretending it was effortless. I woke up laughing at myself, then spent the rest of the morning feeling unsettled. The tension reached a high point at the next family gathering, a backyard barbecue that was supposed to be casual, just burgers and sunshine. But you know how families are, nothing is ever just casual. Nicole arrived late, parking her car with an air of practiced nonchalance, wearing sunglasses, even though the sun had already dipped behind the trees. She didn't bring the bag. In fact, she didn't bring much of anything. No salad, no side dish, just herself, moving through the crowd like she was trying not to get caught in a net. I tried to play it cool, to act like nothing was wrong, but every conversation felt like a minefield. My uncle cornered me by the grill, making comments about generational wealth and lucky breaks. Someone else asked if Nicole was seeing anyone rich these days. It was almost a relief when Nicole finally drifted over to where I stood, awkwardly holding a plate of potato chips and watching the smoke curl up from the barbecue. We made small talk. She commented on the food, the weather, the neighbor's dog, anything except the bag. For a second, it almost felt normal. Then suddenly she said, "I wish everyone would just let it go. It was supposed to be a nice gesture." Her voice was low, tight, almost angry. I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Instead, I stared at the grill, wondering how one present could make everything so complicated. After Nicole wandered away, I found myself replaying her words. Was I the one keeping this alive? Or was it everyone else? I realized that maybe the gift had become a kind of scapegoat, something we could all point to instead of admitting we were hurt, jealous, or simply lost. When my mom called me the next morning, she didn't ask about the barbecue. She wanted to know about the bag. "Don't let it come between you," she said, her voice gentle but firm. Sometimes people do strange things for love or out of fear. I thought about that for a long time. About how family love can look like a million things: a home-cooked meal, a snide remark, or a gift so expensive you can't accept it without wondering what it really means. Maybe the bag was just a stand-in for all the things we couldn't say. Or maybe it was the first sign that the rift between me and Nicole was about more than money. It was about the years we'd spent drifting apart, pretending that everything was fine. The whole thing reminded me of a story my dad used to tell about a man who tries to impress his neighbor by building a fence so tall it blocks out the sun. In the end, the only thing the fence achieves is making both families miserable, and no one remembers why it was built in the first place. That's what this felt like: a wall built one misunderstanding at a time, until neither of us could remember where the foundation had started. I spent a lot of time that week staring at the bag as if it might blink first and confess its secrets. There's a strange kind of pressure that comes with receiving a gift that's wildly out of sync with your world, a pressure to be grateful, to be worthy, to prove you can carry the weight without dropping it. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be Nicole, ready to finally talk things out. Instead, I got forwarded memes from coworkers, automated appointment reminders, and the odd family group chat ping that I mostly ignored. On Thursday evening, I caught myself practicing what I might say to Nicole if I had the courage. "What's really going on? Why did you give me something so extravagant?" But every time I pictured her face, my words tangled into knots. I realized I was afraid not of the bag, but of what it represented. Beneath the glossy exterior, there was an old wound neither of us wanted to open, the way we'd both tried for years to prove our worth in a family that measured love by quiet acts of service and silent sacrifice. By Friday, the silence was too loud to ignore. I called Nicole. She didn't answer but texted back a terse, "Can't talk. Busy." I stared at my phone, trying to remember the last time we'd had an actual conversation, not just exchanged updates or perfunctory emojis. The bag sat by the door, looking both ridiculous and accusing. In a fit of frustration, I shoved it into my closet and piled a heap of winter sweaters on top. That night, I met an old friend, Tara, for drinks at a cozy bar on Alberta Street. I told her everything: the dinner, the bag, the family rumors, the silence. She listened, nodding sympathetically, and then burst out laughing. "You know, in my family, if someone gave you a 340K bag, it'd come with a note: return after use, dry clean only, and don't embarrass us on Instagram." We laughed so hard that the bartender gave us free fries. It felt good to make light of it, but as I walked home under the orange glow of the streetlights, I knew the problem wasn't really about the bag. It was about what came before it and what came after. The next morning, I finally understood what my mom meant about people doing strange things for love or out of fear. Nicole's gift had been an offering, but it had also been a challenge, one I hadn't risen to, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how. I started thinking about all the ways we'd measured each other over the years: grades, jobs, relationships, milestones. We'd both kept score, even when we pretended not to. On Sunday, just as the clouds finally broke and Portland was briefly bathed in sunlight, Nicole texted, "Can we talk?" My heart thudded as I typed back, "Of course. Come over." When she arrived, she looked tired. Her eyes ringed with worry, but she walked in with purpose. We sat on opposite ends of the sofa, the bag between us like a mediator neither of us had asked for. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I cracked a joke about the bag being better protected than Fort Knox, hoping to break the tension. Nicole managed a small smile, then sighed. "Casey, I know this whole thing has gotten out of hand. I wanted to do something big. Something nice." I nodded, trying to keep my own voice steady. "But why? Why now? And why me?" She was silent for a long time. Finally, she looked up. "I got a bonus at work. A huge one. I've been killing myself to impress my boss, and when I finally got recognized, I thought, what's the point if I can't share it with someone I love? But then everyone started talking, and I felt like no matter what I did, it would be wrong. I thought if I gave you something incredible, you'd see how much I care." Instead, I just made things weird. It was the most honest thing she'd said to me in months. I felt the knot in my chest loosen just a little. I'm sorry too, I said quietly. I didn't mean to make you feel bad about it. I just. I guess I was scared it meant you didn't really see me, or that you were trying to fix something we can't fix with money. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I miss us, Casey. Before everything got so complicated. And there it was, the real wound exposed at last. All the luxury in the world couldn't patch the years we'd spent drifting apart, misunderstanding each other's motives, and letting pride and silence build walls higher than any designer fence. We sat together, not saying much, but for the first time in a long while, the silence felt like a beginning, not an ending. The air in the living room felt heavier than ever, as if all the years of unsaid things had decided to descend at once. Nicole wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, embarrassed by her tears. But I just handed her a box of tissues and let the silence stretch. Sometimes the most honest conversations begin when no one's quite sure what to say. Eventually, I broke the tension. You know, I said if we were in a sitcom, this is the part where the laugh track would kick in and we'd hug it out. Nicole snorted the sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Yeah, or the part where one of us storms out and slams the door dramatically. We both smiled, finding a little humor in our mutual awkwardness. I asked her how long she'd been feeling this pressure to prove herself, to make grand gestures. She told me about her job, the endless grind, the promotions dangled just out of reach. It's like every time I think I'm enough, someone moves the finish line, she admitted. And I wanted to show you I could give you something that no one else could. Her voice trembled, not with pride, but with exhaustion. Hearing her say it out loud made me realize how much we'd both inherited from our parents, the need to measure love by effort, the unspoken belief that you have to earn your place even in your own family. I told her how I always felt like I was competing against an invisible scoreboard, how even now at 31 I sometimes worried I was letting everyone down. She shook her head. I never wanted you to feel that way, Casey. I was just jealous that you seemed so confident, like you belonged wherever you went. I thought if I gave you something big, I could be part of your world too. The honesty in her confession took me by surprise. I realized that the gift, for all its complications, had been born from love, not arrogance or rivalry. We talked for hours, sometimes circling back to the bag, but mostly digging through old stories, childhood memories, holiday disasters, the dumb inside jokes only siblings remember. Every so often, one of us would make a joke to break up the heaviness. At one point, I asked, "Do you think there's a return policy for emotional baggage?" Nicole groaned and threw a pillow at me, the tension melting just a bit more. As the evening deepened, I felt the urge to say something I'd never said before. You know, Nicole, I'd trade every fancy bag in the world just to have my sister back. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. Me too. There was a quiet understanding then, a truce, fragile but real. Our parents called later to check in, as if they could sense the seismic shift from across town. Mom said she was proud of us for talking. Dad told a story about a time he and his brother fought over a fishing pole for weeks, only to realize neither of them even liked fishing that much. I laughed and told him our baggage was a little more expensive, but he just said, "All families carry something." By the time Nicole left that night, I felt lighter than I had in months. The bag stayed behind, still gleaming, but somehow less threatening, just an object, no longer the centerpiece of our drama. Nicole hugged me tightly at the door. "Thank you for listening," she whispered. "I'm going to try to stop running so hard, maybe just show up more." After she was gone, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker through the mist. The whole thing felt surreal. Who would have guessed that a designer handbag could unravel years of family tension and then start to stitch things back together? It struck me as funny, like the universe's idea of a cosmic joke. I knew things wouldn't be perfect right away. We still had work to do, years of habits and hurts to unlearn, and new ways of showing up for each other to discover. But for the first time in a long time, I believed we could actually do it. Nicole and I had found our way back to the beginning, where love was simple and messy and honest. And as I curled up on the couch, I realized that maybe the real luxury wasn't the bag or the money or even the apology. Maybe it was the courage to tell the truth, to let yourself be seen, and to forgive not just your family, but yourself. The next morning felt different. Not dramatic or cinematic, just quieter, as if the whole city had taken a deep breath and decided to let some things go. I brewed coffee, watched a shaft of sun cut through the usual Portland haze, and tried to sit with the strange new calm that had settled over me. The bag was still there, a flash of luxury in my very ordinary kitchen, but for the first time, I didn't feel like it was staring me down. It was just a bag, one with a story, sure, but no longer the star of a drama I couldn't control. Nicole texted that afternoon. "Still friends," she wrote, adding a winking emoji. It made me laugh. I sent back, "Only if you promise never to buy me a car or a yacht." Then added, "Love you." Her reply came almost instantly. "Deal. And love you too." There was a simplicity in our exchange that felt almost radical after months of tension. I realized that beneath all the posturing between us within our family was just the ache of wanting to be seen, understood, and chosen. When you grow up in a family that sometimes measures love by sacrifice, or who works the hardest, it's easy to forget you're allowed to need softness too. The days that followed were mostly uneventful, but in the best way. Nicole and I talked more about ordinary things like meal prep, bad dates, TV shows. We started to rediscover the easy rhythm we'd once had, the shorthand jokes and funny voices that made us feel like kids again. At one point, we even joked about starting a podcast, Luxury Sibling Drama this week, Emotional Carry-Ons. I told her I'd need a scriptwriter since my life was starting to sound like a telenovela. She threatened to read my old diary entries live on air. Yet underneath the laughter there was also grief, a sense of mourning for all the years we'd spent quietly misunderstanding each other. One night, I couldn't sleep and ended up scrolling through old photos. Two sunburned kids at the Oregon coast, teens in matching Halloween costumes, blurry shots of our first apartment. It hurt seeing how close we once were. But it was also a comfort, a reminder that love changes form, but rarely disappears. Sometimes it just gets covered up by years of baggage, literal and otherwise. At work, the drama faded quickly. My coworkers stopped asking about the bag, and my boss congratulated me on a recent bike lane proposal that actually got funded, a small win that felt huge after so many personal storms. For the first time in ages, I felt like I could focus unburdened by the constant background noise of family politics. Nicole called one evening to tell me she'd turned down a new job offer, one that paid more, but would have taken her out of state. "I think I need to work on staying put," she said. "Not running for the next gold star." I told her I was proud, and I meant it. She admitted she was scared, but also a little excited. It felt like we were both finally learning that success doesn't have to mean outshining each other or proving we're worthy of love. There's something oddly liberating about admitting you don't have everything figured out. I started making fun of my own mistakes more often, sending Nicole ridiculous memes about emotional baggage fees and poking fun at how melodramatic our lives had gotten. Humor, as it turned out, was the fastest way through the awkwardness. We even started a running joke about creating a family baggage claim at every holiday dinner where everyone could check their emotional drama at the door. And yet there were moments that still stung, a stray comment from a relative, an old story that felt too raw to retell. But those moments didn't define us anymore. I realized I was no longer bracing for the next misunderstanding, the next flare of jealousy or pride. We'd found a tentative peace, one made of forgiveness, and the choice to keep showing up, even when it was hard. On a quiet Sunday, Nicole and I sat together in my living room, sipping tea and watching the rain streak the windows. She reached out and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she said quietly, "even when I made it hard." I squeezed back, smiling. "We're family. We always find our way back eventually, even if we have to detour through a luxury boutique first. We both laughed, and in that laughter was everything: the pain, the relief, and the promise of something stronger. For the first time in a long while, I believed it. No bag, no rumor, no old story could break the bond we were slowly rebuilding. The days after our truce unfolded with a gentler rhythm. Nicole and I grew comfortable in the simple closeness of sending each other blurry pet photos or venting about work stress. No grand gestures, no forced check-ins, just the ordinary back and forth that had always been the true glue of our bond. I felt the old, easy affection returning in small ways, like when she called just to ask if I'd seen the latest viral dance trend, or when I texted her a picture of my doomed attempt at baking sourdough bread. And yet, underneath the warmth, I couldn't help but process the deeper lessons the whole bag episode had left behind. For one, I found myself thinking a lot about boundaries, how they aren't walls meant to keep family out, but gentle fences that help us love each other honestly. Nicole and I had both tried to prove ourselves in ways that ended up hurting more than helping. That realization made me wonder about my own patterns. How often had I measured love by what I could do for someone instead of who I was for them? Maybe the bag had only been the flashiest symptom of a much older family habit. Our parents noticed the change between us. Mom kept remarking on how nice it is to see you girls laughing again, while Dad, in his classic understated way, grilled burgers for us and reminded us about the importance of letting things go. Family dinners became less about what we brought to the table and more about being present together, flaws and all. Even our relatives, always eager for gossip, seemed to grow bored when the drama failed to resurface. At the next family event, no one mentioned the bag. Instead, we played lawn games, told bad jokes, and lost track of time the way we used to as kids. One afternoon, Nicole came by with a box of old photos she'd found in her closet. We spent hours sifting through memories, awkward school pictures, vacation snapshots, even a few embarrassing childhood business ventures, like our short-lived lemonade stand shut down due to creative differences, as Nicole put it. We laughed until our sides hurt, each story peeling back a little more of the distance that had crept in over the years. In one photo, we're wearing matching Halloween costumes, our faces painted as superheroes, arms around each other and beaming. I realized that even if adulthood had changed us, the core of our connection was still there, scrappy, resilient, and at its best, lighthearted. But healing isn't a straight line. There were moments when an old insecurity flared up, or when one of us bristled at an innocent comment. Sometimes I'd catch myself worrying the peace wouldn't last, that we'd slip back into old habits as soon as life got busy or stressful again. In those moments, I'd remind myself that progress wasn't about never messing up. It was about returning again and again to honesty and grace. Nicole seemed to be learning the same lesson. She texted once after a difficult day, admitting she still felt pressure to impress everyone at work, but that she was trying to define her own success now, not just chase someone else's approval. We celebrated small victories together. When Nicole got recognized by her hospital for exceptional patient care, I showed up with balloons and takeout. When my bike lane proposal was finally approved, she sent me a cheesy e-card and insisted we toast with the fancy soda she knew I liked. Each little act felt like a patch over the places where we'd once pulled apart. Sometimes humor really was the best medicine. We kept up our running joke about emotional baggage claims, threatening to charge each other for every childhood grudge checked at the door. One night, Nicole even suggested we start a joint Instagram account to document all the absurd moments only siblings could understand. If nothing else, we'll give everyone a new reason to gossip, she teased. As the summer turned to fall, I felt something inside me soften. I understood now that loving someone meant accepting their imperfections and forgiving your own. The bag was still in my closet, but it had lost its power. It was just a thing, a relic of one wild chapter in our relationship, no longer the symbol of everything unsaid. I realized that the real treasure was this slow return to trust, laughter, and the promise of a fresh start. And every now and then, when doubt crept back in, I'd look at those old Halloween photos, or reread our goofy texts and remember family isn't about the presents you give or the mistakes you make. It's about the courage to show up, say you're sorry, and keep trying one ordinary day at a time. As autumn settled over Portland, the city's gold and crimson leaves seemed to mirror the new chapter unfolding between Nicole and me. Our conversations, once brittle and tense, now felt easy, sometimes even joyful. I found myself looking forward to her texts and calls, delighted by the way humor and honesty had crept back in. It was as if the emotional knots that once bound us had loosened, letting something lighter and truer take their place. We both became more intentional about setting boundaries, not just with each other, but with the rest of the family. When an aunt tried to stir up the old story about the bag at Thanksgiving, Nicole looked her in the eye and said, "It's old news, Aunt Jan. Casey and I are just happy to have each other." I felt a rush of gratitude. Her words were simple, but in their clarity, they set us free from the expectations and judgments that had weighed on us for so long. Mom noticed the difference too. She started hosting Sunday dinners again, and it was as if she wanted to nurture the fragile peace that had bloomed between her daughters. Instead of scrutinizing what we wore or brought, she focused on making meals that felt like comfort soups simmering on the stove, homemade bread mugs of cocoa warming our hands. Dad chimed in with his trademark dad jokes, which landed with their usual mixture of eye rolls and laughter, but even that felt like a sign things were back on track. Nicole and I started to lean on each other in new ways. When she struggled with a tough situation at work, she called me instead of bottling it up. When I hit a wall with a difficult project, she showed up with takeout and a sympathetic ear. There was no grand gesture, just steady, consistent presence. We learned to recognize each other's cues, the way Nicole tapped her fingers when she was anxious or how I got quiet when I was overwhelmed. Instead of brushing these signals aside, we honored them, giving each other the space or support needed. The bag itself faded into the background. At one point, Nicole joked about auctioning it off and using the money for a sister road trip. I laughed and told her I'd rather camp in the rain with her than stay in a five-star hotel alone. We both knew we'd never sell it. It had become a quirky part of our story, a reminder of how things could go wrong, but also miraculously, how they could be put right. Still, healing was not always a linear path. There were moments when doubt or old insecurities reared their heads, a careless comment here, a misunderstanding there. One night after a particularly long day, I found myself staring at the bag and wondering if all the effort to rebuild was worth it. Was this fragile piece just a temporary lull before another storm? But then Nicole texted out of the blue, "Thinking of you. Hope you're okay. Want to watch bad reality TV and eat junk food this weekend?" I smiled, realizing that love in families is rarely a dramatic declaration. Most of the time, it's in the tiny everyday invitations to stay close, to keep showing up, even after everything that's happened. That weekend, sprawled on the couch together, half watching a ridiculous dating show, Nicole nudged me. "Hey, thanks for sticking with me through all the weirdness. I know it wasn't easy." I nudged her back. "You're worth it. We're worth it." We both laughed, and I realized the truth of it. There is no shortcut through forgiveness, no cheat code for trust. You build it slowly, brick by brick, with vulnerability and patience, and more than a little laughter. Autumn slipped quietly into winter, and as the city braced for rain and long nights, I felt ready for whatever came next. The story of the bag, the scandal, the secrets, the wounds was no longer the main plot. Instead, it was just one chapter in a bigger story about two sisters finding their way back to each other. The best part: that story was still being written, one imperfect but hopeful day at a time. Winter arrived with its signature Portland drizzle, cloaking the city in a persistent mist and drawing everyone indoors. I found comfort in small rituals, lighting candles in the evening, brewing spiced chai, and wrapping myself in an old quilt that Nicole had given me long ago, back when our lives seemed so much simpler. Through the rain-streaked windows, the world outside looked softer, and inside I felt the same sense of gentle renewal, a quiet aftermath after a long, stormy season. Nicole and I carried on, neither pretending everything was perfect, nor letting old ghosts dictate the present. We made space for each other's quirks and rough edges, learning to say what we needed before little misunderstandings could grow into bigger ones. Some nights I'd catch her glancing at the infamous bag in the corner of my living room, and we'd share a grin that needed no words, an inside joke, a reminder of how far we'd come. On the first real snow of the season, Nicole and I decided to meet at our favorite neighborhood cafe. The air was sharp, the city hushed under a delicate white blanket. As we sipped coffee and watched people shuffle by in wool hats and scarves, she asked me, "Do you think we'll ever be completely over it?" "The bag, I mean, the whole saga." I paused, searching for the honest answer. "Maybe not completely," I said, "but I think we've learned how to carry it better. It's just a story now, a weird, funny, sometimes painful chapter. But it's not who we are." Nicole smiled relief and acceptance in her eyes. We talked about future plans, vacations, work, dreams, maybe starting a new family tradition. For the first time in years, the future felt open, not weighed down by past hurts or old resentments. We even made a pact to do something ridiculous together each year, to always have a fresh shared adventure, just to keep the baggage light, Nicole joked. Our family gatherings became warmer, more relaxed. No one brought up the bag anymore, or if they did, it was just another punchline in our growing collection of family stories. Our parents seemed content to watch us rebuild, mom fussing over new recipes, dad sneaking us homemade fudge, each of them quietly grateful for the peace that had settled between their daughters. But perhaps the biggest change was internal. I realized that loving myself with all my old doubts and dreams had made it easier to love Nicole, as she was not as I once wished she'd be. I saw her clearly, not as my rival or my responsibility, but as a fellow traveler stumbling through life and just trying like me to get it right. Forgiveness and trust weren't destinations, but ongoing choices, daily acts of hope. Sometimes I'd think back on that first awkward dinner, the gleaming bag between us like a velvet-wrapped bomb. Now looking at it, I could almost laugh at how much power we'd given it, how in trying to protect each other or ourselves, we'd nearly lost the very thing we needed most. If the bag taught us anything, it's that the real treasures in family are not things, but the stubborn, tender effort to understand, to apologize, to return again and again, even when it's hard. One night, as we wrapped up another laughter-filled call, Nicole whispered, "Thanks for never giving up on me." I whispered back, "Right back at you, kiddo." The city outside was silent, the last snow falling softly, and I let the peace of that moment sink in. The bag would always be there, just another story, no longer the centerpiece. So here's my reality check: family isn't about the presents or the perfect moments. It's about showing up, letting go, and loving each other, baggage and all. Share your thoughts about Nicole's choice. Was she being too harsh or just protecting herself after years of feeling hurt? This prompt encourages you to reflect and share your perspective about setting boundaries in family relationships and the importance of loving and respecting yourself. Where are you reading from, and what time is it right now in your part of the world? I'd love to know. Thank you for listening to Nicole's story. Don't forget to share your thoughts and follow for more deep, meaningful stories like this one.